Have you ever witnessed a single act of kindness change everything? A snack bar owner saves 10 motorcyclists in a snowstorm. The next day, a long line of motorcycles appears in front of Tempero de Alma, the only snack bar on a forgotten stretch of state highway connecting the border to the coast. Helena Santos, 53, was about to turn the open sign to closed when the roar of engines cut through the furious howling of the storm. "Let's close early today, Vim," she said to the young waiter who was cleaning the last tables. "No one will show up in this weather. Not even the crows are flying." The bank had just sent the third eviction notice. 3 months' rent was overdue. 1 week to vacate. The diner Helena had run for 2 decades since her husband's death was about to become a memory. The place that fed truck drivers, travelers, and lonely adventurers was now withering like a plant without sun. A violent gust of wind shook the windows, bringing with it the unmistakable sound of metal against asphalt. Helena rushed to the door, her trembling hand pushing the condensation-fogged glass. Outside, in the white curtain of snow, a motorcycle lay fallen on the shoulder. His driver, a black figure against the absolute white, tried to lift the heavy machine while the wind seemed determined to keep him on the ground. "Vim, grab that old jacket and come with me," Helena shouted, already advancing against the storm without waiting for an answer. The cold cut like a razor, but she didn't hesitate. With surprising strength for her medium build, Helena helped the motorcyclist lift the bike. "Get inside quick," she ordered, pointing to the diner. Just as they managed to get inside, other headlights appeared on the road, ghostly lights cutting through the dense curtain of snow. One by one, 10 motorcyclists parked their bikes and took shelter in the warmth of Tempero de Alma. "The road is blocked 10 kilometers from here," said the first motorcyclist, removing his soaked helmet. "The police said not until tomorrow afternoon, if we're lucky." Can you imagine the power of one compassionate choice? Helena scanned the group, mostly young men, wearing leather jackets decorated with motorcycle club emblems she had never seen before. Their bodies were covered in tattoos. They were unshaven, and their expressions were exhausted. They were not the kind of customers who frequented her establishment. "The coffee is still hot," she said simply, returning behind the counter. "And I can make something for you to eat." The leader of the group, a tall man with a diagonal scar across his face, surveyed the nearly empty place, the clean tables, the window illuminated against the gathering darkness. "We don't want to bother you, ma'am. We just need a place to wait out the storm." Helena poured a steaming mug and set it in front of him. "I've never sent anyone away hungry or cold. Son, I'm not going to start today." What the bikers didn't know was that 5 hours earlier, the regional bank manager, Mr. Mendes, had parked his imported car exactly where the motorcycles now rested. In his impeccable suit and carrying an Italian leather briefcase, he entered the empty establishment and sat down on the same bench now occupied by the biker leader. "Mrs. Santos," he said, slowly chewing a piece of pie that had barely touched his lips. "I can't put this off any longer. Our investors are eager to get started on the new venture. This stretch of highway has potential for a modern gas station, not this." He looked around with disdain. This relic has fed travelers for 20 years, Mr. Mendes," Helena replied, maintaining her dignity. "It fed your father when he was still a truck driver before he started at the bank." The banker paused slightly, but kept his expression impassive. "Business is business, Mrs. Santos. I have a final offer. Leave in a week, accept a small compensation, and we all win." "Everyone except me and the people who depend on this place," she replied. The banker smiled coldly. "No one depends on this place. It's just an old-fashioned stop that progress will swallow up." He placed a few bills on the table and left without looking back. Now, as she served coffee and improvised sandwiches from the last supplies in the pantry to the motorcyclists, Helena noticed something curious. The man with the scar, who had introduced himself as Marco, was examining every corner of the diner with peculiar interest. His eyes stopped at the small photo mural behind the cash register. "Has this diner always been yours, ma'am?" "Helena Santos." "And yes, mine and my husband's. He passed away 20 years ago." Marco nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on a specific photo. He said nothing more, but exchanged glances with the other bikers. What no one in that group could have imagined was that Helena's simple decision to open her doors on a stormy night when she had every right to close them would not only save those bikers from the deadly cold, but would set off a chain of events that would forever change the lives of everyone involved, especially the arrogant banker who planned to demolish the last refuge on that forgotten road. If this story of quiet courage and unexpected justice touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the Black Voices channel, because sometimes the universe has surprising ways of repaying the kindness of those who help without expecting anything in return, and of bringing justice when the powerful think they can simply erase what no longer serves them. The storm howled with renewed fury, lashing the windows of Tempero de Alma as the clock struck 3 o'clock in the morning. Helena couldn't sleep. Sitting in the small office behind the kitchen, she reviewed the accounts by the light of an old lamp, the numbers dancing before her tired eyes. On the makeshift sofa in the break room, Vim slept wrapped in a blanket. On the floor of the cafeteria, the motorcyclists had settled down on mats and blankets, their snores forming a strange symphony against the silence of the early morning. A slight creak made Helena look up. Marco, the leader of the motorcyclists, was standing at the office door. "Sorry to bother you, Mrs. Helena," he whispered. "I couldn't sleep." "Me neither," she replied, pointing to the chair in front of her. "Coffee." Marco sat down, examining the papers scattered on the table. "This looks serious." "The bank is taking my diner in a week," she said simply. "They want to build a modern gas station here." As they spoke, Marco noticed a photograph on the wall. "This man, is he your husband?" "Roberto. He died 20 years ago. A road accident." Marco took a deep breath. "My father told me stories about a place on the highway where a man named Roberto saved his group during a snowstorm in 1997. He was riding his first blue Harley-Davidson." Helena almost dropped her cup. She quickly grabbed an old album, flipping through it until she found a faded photo. Roberto with 5 motorcyclists, a blue Harley in the corner. "My father is in this photo," Marco said, touching the image of a young man. "Jorge Oliveira. Jorge, Roberto, and he became friends after that day. They exchanged letters for years." "My father passed away last year," Marco said softly. "Among his things, we found letters from your husband and stories about this place." The next morning, as the snowstorm subsided, the doorbell rang. A woman of about 40, dressed formally, entered, shaking the snow from her coat. "I'm Ana Pereira, a lawyer specializing in real estate law," she introduced herself. "I'm here for the Solidarity Motorcyclists group." Marco appeared from the area where the others were sleeping. "Anna is an old friend, one of the best lawyers I know." "I spent the night reviewing your case," Honor explained, placing her briefcase on the counter. "Marco sent me photos of all the documents. I found several irregularities in the foreclosure process." Among the bikers who were now waking up, a young man named Kevin stood up timidly. "Kevin works in digital security," Marco explained. "He did a little investigation on the regional bank. Mr. Mendes has some digital skeletons in his closet." "Why would they do that for me?" Helena asked incredulously. "Motorcyclists have long memories," Marco replied, tapping the photo on the wall. "We are an organization that fights injustice." Mr. Mendes parked his imported car in front of the diner. Seeing the motorcyclists, he entered arrogantly, adjusting his expensive suit. "Mrs. Santos, I came to see if you've started packing. Our investors are eager for demolition next week." Helena stepped forward calmly. "Mr. Mendes, this is still my establishment. And I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Ana Pereira, my lawyer." The banker's expression faltered. "Lawyer. Mrs. Santos. This is a waste of time. The documents have already been approved by Judge Ferrer." Anna smiled coldly. "Interesting to mention Judge Ferrer. I was explaining to my client about the conflicts of interest we have identified between the magistrate and certain real estate developments in the area." For the first time, the banker looked genuinely concerned, especially when he noticed Kevin typing something on his laptop. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove anything." We just need to raise enough questions to get a postponement, Anna replied. Considering the connections between the bank, the judge, and the Prosrail Postos company. Mr. Mendes' face paled. That's absurd. Defamation. Marco stepped forward. Mr. Mendes. Roads like this hold stories that money can't buy. And people like Mrs. Helena are too rare to be discarded for greed. What no one realized at that moment was that behind the frail and tired figure of Helena Santos was a woman who had faced challenges far greater than an arrogant banker. For 2 decades, she had carefully guarded not only memories, but also documents, records, and conversations, small pieces of a puzzle that were now finally beginning to fit together through the unlikely hands of a group of motorcyclists that fate had brought to her door. Mr. Mendes would never have imagined that his defeat had begun long before that snowy morning. It had begun the moment he underestimated a simple roadside diner owner. Noon. The sun finally broke through the clouds as a line of motorcycles pulled up in front of the municipal courthouse. News of the emergency hearing had spread like wildfire among the biker community. One by one, men and women dressed in leather jackets entered the building. Mr. Mendes adjusted his tie as he looked with contempt at the crowd filling the small courtroom. Judge Ferrer, his longtime friend, had reluctantly agreed to review the case, but the banker remained confident. A lawyer newly arrived from the capital, and a bunch of bikers were no match for the legal machine he had controlled for years. "We are wasting time, Your Honor," declared the bank's lawyer, a bored-looking man. "The documents have already been approved by this very court." Judge Ferrer looked uncomfortable, his eyes avoiding the bench where Helena sat between Anna and Marco. "I agree that this case has already been tried, but the new defense claims to have new evidence." Anna stood up with the calmness of someone who already knew the outcome before the battle had even begun. "Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to call our first witness, Mr. Eduardo Mendes." The banker walked to the designated chair, his usual arrogance only slightly shaken. The entire court fell silent when Anna activated the projector. "Mr. Mendes, do you recognize this email?" On the screen, a message from 6 months ago displayed his name in the header. "I need that environmental license by Friday. Judge Ferrer is already on board, but we need the old lady's land. Offer her any crumbs. She has no way of proving the real value." Mr. Mendes' face turned pale instantly. This was fabricated. It's a forgery." Anna smiled subtly. "Kevin." The young motorcyclist stood up holding a laptop. "I am a certified digital forensic expert, Your Honor. These emails were recovered from the bank servers with validated timestamps and intact digital signatures. They are 100% authentic." A murmur rippled through the room as Anna continued to project a series of communications detailing the scheme, the deliberate devaluation of the property, the bribery of environmental inspectors, the manipulation of appraisals, and most devastatingly, explicit messages between Mr. Mendes and Judge Ferrer discussing how they would divide the profits. Judge Ferrer stood abruptly. "This session is adjourned." "We need to, Your Honor," Anna's voice cut through the air like cold steel. "I must inform you that this evidence has already been sent simultaneously to the Public Prosecutor's Office, the National Council of Justice, and 3 media outlets." At that moment, 2 court officers entered the room. One of them approached the judge with an official document. "Judge Nerona has ordered your immediate replacement in this case, sir, and there is a preliminary warrant for the seizure of your electronic devices." The second officer walked toward Mr. Mendes, who looked like he had aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "Mr. Eduardo Mendes, you are subpoenaed to testify in an investigation for fraud, active corruption, and conspiracy." The new judge, a stern-looking middle-aged woman, took only 20 minutes to overturn the foreclosure and order a full investigation into the regional bank's practices in the region. When they left the courthouse, Helena was surprised by the deafening noise. The entire street was filled with motorcycles, not just 10, but hundreds of them, lined up perfectly in front of the courthouse. Motorcyclists of all ages and types. Some with club patches she had never seen before. Others with makeshift t-shirts displaying a stylized diner and the words Tempero de Alma, a light on the road. Marco smiled at her shocked expression. "Did I mention we're an organization?" What I didn't tell you is that we're the largest independent network of motorcyclists in the country. Tempro de Alma isn't just a diner, Helena. It's a symbol to us. An older biker approached, removing his helmet. Your husband Roberto saved my life in 1995, he said, his voice breaking. I was suffering from hypothermia, lost on the road when he found me and brought me to the cafe. We never forget those who help us when no one else would. One by one, motorcyclists approached with similar stories of how Roberto and Helena had been a beacon on the dark roads, offering hot food, a place to sleep, or simply a kind word when they needed it most. On the opposite sidewalk, Mr. Mendes watched the scene in disbelief, his phone ringing incessantly. His world was falling apart as he watched the growing celebration around the woman he had considered insignificant. In front of the bank, a bailiff posted an investigation notice on the glass doors. Nervous customers lined up to withdraw their investments as reporters began to arrive, drawn by news of the scandal. Helena crossed the street and stopped in front of the banker. Mr. Mendes, she said calmly, my husband always said that roads hold memories longer than any accounting book. The man, now broken, avoided her gaze. You don't understand, he muttered. I was just following orders. The investors, the board. There is always a choice, Helena replied, and now you will have to live with yours. Returning to her new friends, Helena didn't see the executive car that pulled up beside the bank, nor the man in the impeccable suit who got out, watching the whole scene with calculated interest. The national director of the regional bank had arrived in person, and his cold gaze followed Helena as she walked among the crowd of motorcyclists. What no one could have predicted at that moment was that the victory in court was only the beginning. As the investigations deepened, a much larger network of corruption began to be revealed. A network that extended to other establishments, other families, other stories of unjust expropriations that had permanently changed the map of that region. And at the center of this transformation would be a simple roadside diner whose lights would never go out again on stormy nights. A year later, the renovated facade of Tempero de Alma gleamed in the spring sunshine. The old faded sign had been replaced by a bright handmade one made by metal workers who were motorcyclists from 3 different states. In the expanded parking lot, motorcycles and cars shared space harmoniously, and a sign announced the latest addition, Solidarity Workshop, 24-hour emergency maintenance. Helena watched the movement at the counter, where 4 employees now worked instead of just them. The young waiter was now the night shift manager, allowing Helena to finally have time to rest after 2 decades of uninterrupted work. Marco was on the phone, called Tanya, the new cashier. He says the group is arriving tomorrow for the festival. Helena smiled. The Motorcycle Solidarity Festival had become a biannual event that attracted hundreds of visitors, boosting the economy of the entire region. What had started as a simple roadside diner had become the epicenter of a support network that stretched for thousands of miles. Across town, in the small apartment he had managed to rent after months of unemployment, Eduardo Mendes, a former regional bank manager, tried once again to answer a call from potential employers. As on previous occasions, the call ended as soon as he mentioned his name. I understand. Thank you for the opportunity. He hung up, staring at the pile of overdue bills. The investigation that had begun with Helena's snack bar had uncovered dozens of similar cases of fraud, contract manipulation, and illegal expropriations. The scheme, which had benefited the bank and its executives for years, was now completely exposed. The former banker looked out the window, seeing in the distance the neon sign of the snack bar he had tried to destroy. He never imagined that a simple shop owner whom he considered insignificant could trigger his downfall. Roads hold memories, she had said. Now he understood. At the regional bank headquarters 2 hours away, the newly appointed director Marcos Oliveira, a familiar face to those who knew the Modistas Solidarios group, was chairing an extraordinary meeting. The restructuring is almost complete, he announced, looking at the executives who remained after the major institutional cleanup. From now on, our regional development program will prioritize small businesses established for more than 10 years with a proven track record of community service. One of the advisors raised her hand. What about the gas station project on the state highways? Mako smiled. It's still on, but with a fundamental redesign. Each station will include space for existing local businesses. The first model will be implemented on the property adjacent to Tempero de Alma, keeping the snack bar as it is. Meanwhile, at City Hall, a vote was taking place on the bill that would create the Solidarity Route, an official tourist circuit connecting historic establishments that, like Tempero de Alma, had resisted real estate speculation and kept alive the tradition of opening their doors to travelers in need. This route is not just a tourist attraction, said Councilwoman Ana Pereira, the same lawyer who had represented Helena a year earlier and now held public office. It is a living monument to the resistance of small business owners who upheld fundamental values when progress threatened to swallow them up without preserving them. The law was passed unanimously with a special clause guaranteeing cultural heritage protection for establishments with more than 15 years of continuous service to the community. In the late afternoon, when Helena closed the cash register, she found a letter addressed to her. The official envelope contained an invitation to receive the state's Community Medal of Honor, the highest civilian award for services to society. As she put the envelope in her drawer, her gaze fell on the old photo of Roberto with the motorcyclists. Next to it, a new frame showed Helena with Marco and his group on the night of the snowstorm a year ago. "You would be proud, stubborn old man," she whispered, touching her husband's image. The lights are still on. That night, when Helena finally retired to her small apartment above the diner, her phone rang. It was Kevin, the young tech expert who had helped expose the bank scheme. "Miss Helena, you need to see this," he said excitedly. "The article about Tempero de Alma has just gone viral. Over 1 million views in just 3 hours. Helena smiled, remembering the young journalist who had visited the establishment the week before recording her story. "I don't understand this internet business, Kevin, but if it helps other people keep their doors open when the storm hits, then so be it." What Helena could never have imagined was that her simple story, born of an act of kindness on a stormy night, was inspiring people across the country to rediscover the value of mutual support communities in an increasingly individualistic world. And when Mr. Mendes finally found a job 6 months later, it was as a night attendant at one of the gas stations in the new chain that had replaced the project he had planned. Across the highway, the lights of Tempero de Alma shone as brightly as ever, reminding him every day that there are forces more powerful than money. The memory of the roads and the solidarity that blossoms when you least expect it. We find ourselves at crossroads in life every day. Moments when we can choose between closing doors or keeping them open, between profiting at the expense of others or thriving while lifting up an entire community. Helena's story reminds us that sometimes an act of kindness that seems like a sacrifice can return as an avalanche of justice and transformation. If this journey touched your heart, subscribe to the Black Voices channel for more real stories of people who with small acts of courage changed not only their lives but the destiny of entire communities. Peace.